Hi, everyone. My name is Emma, and I'm a graduate research assistant here at the Center for Social Science Research. So today I want to talk about how to use Google Forms to create surveys. So this video is for anyone that's new to social science research, or even for students or folks that are just looking to pick up some new skills and new ways to send out surveys. So this is going to be a two-part series. So this first video here is just going to take you through how to use Google Forms and what kind of some of the ins and outs of that are. And then the second video is going to be about once you've sent out your survey, how do you then analyze all the data that you have? So first, we're going to show you how to create a Google account, and then we're going to take you through Google Forms. So let's go ahead and get started, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, so I've got you over here on my monitor, but I'm going to pop back and forth in between my two screens here. So the first thing you want to do is if you don't have a Google account to create one. So unfortunately, I think I'm blocking some of these buttons for you with this setup here. But if you're not signed into a Google account or you don't have one, you'll see a button that says sign in. So once you click on that button, if you don't have a Google account, you'll see that there's an option to create a new account. This is a really easy process. It only takes about 5 to 10 minutes, and you really only have to plug in your name, create a password, and then create a user handle, which will be your email address. So go ahead and follow all those prompts and go ahead and verify your account and get signed in, and then you can start using some of these Google features. So once you do, you'll see that there is a grouping of 9 gray buttons, and these are your Google apps. So go ahead and click on those, and then you can scroll down here and see that there's a button for your Google account, there's YouTube and Gmail. And then if you keep scrolling through these, it's going to start to look more familiar. So you'll see docs and sheets and slides, which these are other great free Google resources that you can use as well. So then if you keep scrolling down, you finally hit Google Forms, this purple icon here. So let's go ahead and click on that. So you'll see with Google Forms that they actually have a template gallery. And this is worth taking a few minutes to kind of look into for yourself. But say there's something specific that you know you want a Google form for. So like a t-shirt sign up or RSVPs, event registration. It's worth scrolling through some of these templates, because if there's something out there that you can use and edit, that'll save you a lot of time. But typically when I'm creating a Google form, I just create a blank one. So let's go ahead and start there. And this is also great too. If you have a very specific vision of what you want your survey to look like, you can just create it yourself and make it exactly the way you want to. So the first thing I usually do is give my survey a title. So let's, for example, say we're going to send out a survey about graduate student experiences in the sociology department here at Mason. So we can go ahead and call this Graduate Student Experience Survey. And then you can see here that you have some options to bold or italicize, underline, or you can even insert links here too. And then this last button just removes formatting in case you change your mind and decide, no, I don't like the way that looks anymore. So typically I do add a description to my surveys. So let's say for this, please take a few minutes to share your experiences in the sociology. It's hard to type in talk at the same time, in the sociology graduate program at George Mason University. Oh man. There we go. So again, you'll see that there are more formatting buttons here that you can click through. So let's say that you have a video that maybe has more instructions that you want people to listen to before they take the survey. You can go ahead and link that here, or you can also do numbered or bulleted lists if you want to explain to people a little bit more about the survey and the process that you want them to take it in. So again, there's also this remove formatting button in case you format it and it's really elaborate, but you change your mind and you don't like it anymore. So let's jump into creating a question. So let's say our first question that we want to ask people is, what program are you in? So in our Mason sociology graduate program, we we have an MA program and a PhD program. So one trick that you can do too to add new response options is you can click your tab button, and then that'll take you to the next line that you can see here. And it just saves you a little bit of time when you're typing up. So we only have an MA and a PhD program, but we accidentally added a third option. So you can click the X button at the end here and go ahead and remove that. And you can see too that a lot of these buttons will start to pop up in different places. So you'll start to get used to them and sort of see some patterns, but you can add an image to the overall question if there's an image associated with your question. You can add images to individual survey responses, which is really cool. And typically when you do multiple choice questions, you also have the option to add another response. So let's say there's a question that you've thought through a couple different options, and you want to give respondents the option to click other in case you don't capture all of the correct response categories. So having this will have a field where people can just go ahead and type in their own answer, which is really nice. So we don't need that for this question. But we can change what kind of question type it is. So typically Google tries to guess what sort of question type it is, and they will sort of guess what they think will work best too. So for this case, let's stick with multiple choice, and then let's add a new question. So to add a new question, you just click this little plus sign here, and then you'll go ahead and have your next question open. So let's say we want to ask students, what year are you in the program? So instead of doing a multiple choice question here, we could either do a short answer and we could have respondents just physically type in, I'm in my first year or I'm in my second year, or we could do a drop-down box. So this is like multiple choice, but it's just a little bit differently formatted just to give some variety to the kinds of questions we're asking. So let's say option 1 is first year, and then second year, third year, fourth year, and fifth year. All right. So as you can see, there's a couple more buttons here that we haven't quite gone over yet, but let's say that there's a question that you want to duplicate. So you want to ask it similarly, and you can just click this duplicate button here, and it'll create a whole new question from the one that you had just previously created. So if you want to change this question slightly, it makes it really easy just to keep that formatting. But then if you decide, no, I kind of changed my mind, I don't want it anymore, you can just go ahead and click that little delete button right there. So let's do one more kind of question. And let's say we want to ask people how they would rate their experience in the program. Let's say, how would you rate your overall experience in the program? So Google, again, is kind of smart. They try to guess what question you're going to ask. So a linear scale could be a really interesting option for this one, so people can see the different response options kind of all laid out next to each other. So let's say the first option is terrible, and then the best option is excellent. So one thing I do want to note here is there's definitely an art to creating survey questions. And if you want a little bit more just tips and tricks and a little bit more thought into how to create really thoughtful and engaging survey questions, definitely check out our community engaged resource workshop materials for session 4. So that's the one where we talk about surveys, and we talk a little bit more how to kind of think through how to ask your survey questions. So we don't have a ton of time to get into it for this video, but those resources do exist if you're interested in them. All right, so thinking back to our survey here, let's look at just a couple of the different question options, and then we'll get into some more of the kind of like bigger settings for your surveys. So you'll notice here, we know the add new question button, and then we also have an import question button. So say there's another survey that you had previously worked on for Google Forms, and you want to import some of those questions. So you'd actually be able to click on those surveys and import those questions directly, which is great and definitely saves you a ton of time. So you can go ahead and do that. You have this use title and description section. So say you want to add a section to your survey and say that, these are going to be some demographic questions and you want to separate it out from other questions. You go ahead and click that. Again, you can add an image, you can add a video, and then you can also add sections. So adding sections like this will create different pages for your surveys and kind of break up some of the questions a little bit more visually for the people who use them. And then another question or little button you'll see here is this required button. So sometimes I get questions about what that means. So if you flip this switch, that'll just mean that the question is required. So someone won't be able to finish your survey without answering that question. So sometimes for social science research, we don't want to make questions required, but sometimes if you're collecting contact information, there are just questions you need to have answered. So that's how you can kind of go about that question too. And then you'll also see these little lines here, which just give you a couple more options. So if you click on this, you can go ahead and add descriptions for your questions if you think they need a little bit more explaining. All right, so let's say, for example, you've got all your questions in, but you think you kind of messed up the order or you just want to reorder them to see what that would look like. So you can click on these buttons right here and really easily drag and drop your questions into different positions on your survey. So I really like this. It just makes it easy to change up your question order and think through what you want the survey to look like. All right, so now that we've got all of our questions, you'll kind of notice that sometimes when you click around to different questions, this formatting will go away. So all you have to do is click back into the questions and then you'll see that formatting come up so you can edit them. All right, so let's look at our survey and see what it'll look like to our respondents. So in order to do that, you're going to go ahead and click this preview button up here. And this will show you what your survey is going to look like to your respondents. So you can see what program are you in, what year are you in the program, and this is kind of what that drop-down menu will look like. And then you can ask people to rate their experience in the program and then go ahead and submit their form. All right, so a couple more things to highlight before we go here. But typically when you do these forms, you also want to make sure that you save it under the name that you've given the survey so you can go back to it and easily edit it and update it. So you'll just come up here and click on this untitled form and Google automatically populates the title that you've given your survey right there. So it makes it super easily. And then you can also save it to a particular folder if you want to, which is nice. Or let's say this is a really important survey and you want to go ahead and star it so you know which one it is so you can come back to it more easily. You have that option. And then you'll see here that there's a couple of different tabs that we can look at. So we're under the questions tab right now, which is how you edit your survey. But then you also have a response tab. So the response tab here will let you see all of the responses to your survey. And since we don't have any responses yet, I won't go into too much detail here about this, but this is something I'll cover a little bit more in the next video. And then lastly, you have this settings tab. So the settings tab lets you just kind of customize your survey a little bit. So if it's a quiz, you have an option to make it a quiz. You can go ahead and say if you want Google to collect email addresses or not. You can send respondents a copy of their responses if you want. So a lot of these are pretty self-explanatory, so I won't go through every single one. But you can have a progress bar if you want. You can have the option to shuffle the question order if you're not as concerned about the order. You can also do a confirmation message if you want. So like a thanks for taking our survey kind of message can pop up if you want it. And then there's also a couple of default settings. And again, a lot of this is about just, do you want to collect email addresses, yes or no? And then do you want to make any questions required? So that's kind of what your settings tab looks like. And then if you click on this little artist palette here, you can customize the colors and the fonts and sort of the theme of the survey. So you can add an image. So if you're doing this for a particular organization, you can go ahead and add your company logo, and you can just change the colors up. So for whatever reason, Google has decided that forms are purple, but if you don't want your form to be purple, that is something you can edit and change. All right, so one more thing I want to highlight on the survey too is whenever you look at the preview again, it's really nice to look at the survey visually and see that there are different kinds of questions that we're looking at. So this is something that we do to avoid survey fatigue in our respondents. So survey fatigue is kind of this idea that sometimes you have a lot of people that will start taking your surveys, but then they don't always finish your surveys. So you want to make your surveys kind of visually interesting to look at, and you want to make sure that you're varying question type so it makes it easier for your survey to take for your respondents. So if you're kind of thinking about this, if you have a lot of questions that are long answer questions or questions that are kind of repetitive and are asking the same sorts of things, people just aren't going to be as motivated to finish your survey, and then you're not going to get as good of data. So by having the survey with different kinds of questions and thinking through how many questions do I need to ask in order to have an effective survey, these are a couple of things that we as researchers can do in our end to kind of mitigate that survey fatigue and to try to prevent that in our respondents. So once you've gone through your preview, all of your settings are the way you want them to, and you've kind of given some thought as to the look of the survey and the questions and the formatting, you get to go ahead and send your survey out. So this is the exciting part here. So you go ahead and click the send button up here, which again, I might be blocking, but there is a purple send button in the top right-hand corner there. And then again, you have the option to say, if you want to collect email addresses from your respondents, and then you can either send your survey through an email or through a link. So I personally think it's a lot easier just to send the link out. And this is also so if you have colleagues or people who are going to help send out the survey for you, it's just typically easier to send people a link so they can share. But then if you're also going to have your link on a flyer, you can go ahead and shorten the URL too. And it's just a little bit more manageable this way too. And then all you do is click copy and you're ready to paste your survey link and distribute it. So I think these are pretty much all of the ins and outs here for how to think through how to create a survey using Google Forms and just a couple of tips and tricks. So I hope you enjoyed this video. And like I said, in our next video, we're going to go ahead and say, okay, you've created your survey, but what do you do next? How do you analyze that data? So thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.